Hi, Ms. Lapaka. It's Eric and Sasha, and we're going to be discussing or interviewing each other on the science or lack thereof in The Martian.
Okay. How would the calories consumed by Mark, as depicted, be sustainable, or would it even be pleasurable for survival or cognitive function?
So the depiction of rationing in the film is very minimal. It shows the main character eating it's literally 2/9 of what they call a protein cube or a protein loaf, and then one baked potato.
It's like similar to MRE for the military?
Right.
Yeah.
But instead of an MRE that's very calorie dense, a potato only has about 100. It was a pretty small potato that they showed. It was probably about 100 to 120 calories, and then the protein loaf, if it was all protein, would have probably only been about 50 calories. So that puts us at about 150 to 170 calories per day. And I think he was on that diet for a considerable amount of time, like months, I think. Which, and dietitians consider a starvation diet, which means you could die. Anything lower than 750 calories for an adult male. So many dietitians believe that he would have been dead within 7 months on that diet, let alone capable of movement or cognitive function by the time he had to take the rover to the other ship that would take him up to the Hermes. So it's not very likely he would have survived.
And then psychologically, which coping mechanisms does Mark use to keep himself sane, and does his psychological state decrease?
So when Mark originally gets left on Mars, you can see he's engaging in a lot of behaviors like talking to himself, fantasizing about things, giving himself nicknames, like in the pirate thing. That's at the end of the movie though. And then keeping the video log. So what he was doing there on like a neurobiological standpoint was keeping the neuron connections in like social areas of his brain. So in our brains, our neurons need activity to remain connected. So if he wasn't doing that, many of his brain cells actually would have died or like been no longer functional. So, but as time goes on, that lack of human interaction, and you could also consider, his nutrition, which we already discussed, you can see his psychological state begin to decline when they tell him to extend his rations, which can connect to the nutrition, but also to his sense of isolation, where he felt he was going to die and started coming up with more outlandish coping mechanisms like naming himself, I forget, something about a pirate.
Yeah.
And going on and on about the international or the maritime
golden
law.
Beard or something?
Yeah, something golden beard, pirate golden beard.
And like you also see it in his physical state. I feel like that depicts how he's doing psychologically.
Like the thinness is sort of a depiction more.
And then not really taking care of his like physical appearance anymore.
Yeah. Okay, Sasha, I have some questions for you. So first thing, how was it realistic how Mark made water on Mars?
So in the movie, he uses rocket fuel to extract hydrogen, and then he uses an oxygenator to create oxygen from CO2. He burns them, and then that causes a combustion reaction to water the potatoes. Through many scientific tests, it is possible to extract oxygen and hydrogen from these sources. And then through the combustion reaction, which is usually a hydrocarbon and an oxygen, and then when heat is applied, the products are water and CO2. And because Watney is burning O2 and H2, the main product would probably be water, and then the plastic surrounding around the potatoes is used to collect it. So when the water condenses, it sticks to the plastic, and when it condenses, it's changing from a gaseous state to liquid to water the potatoes.
Yeah, it's possible. All right. And lastly, how are the plants able to survive on Mars, and does the method Mark used to make soil work?
Okay, so Mars soil has high levels of perchlorate, which is like similar to a salt, and then the plants contain rogoth, which is rocky material that is covering the surface of Mars, and that contains high levels of iron, which gives it its red color. And then Mars also lacks micronutrients and organisms in its soil, which makes it difficult for plants to grow. And according to Gary Jordan at NASA, in reality, the soil on Mars actually does does have the nutrients plants would need to survive on Mars. They may not have the right amount of nutrients depending on where astronauts land on the planet. So they need to use fertilizers similar to what Mark did with his human waste. And then, the perchlorate in the soil would cause the water to leach out and separate, which also adds to the difficulty of growing plants. Perchlorate is also a hazardous chemical to humans, so any food grown in it could cause harm to the person. So treatment would have to be done to the soil beforehand, and then you'd have to grow it in like a greenhouse environment because the extremely low temperatures, atmospheric differences, and then the harmful solar UV radiation because Mars lacks an ozone layer. Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Bye,
You did
Mr.
it.
Patka.